Out here, the sun doesn't just shine, it judges. For 15 years, I'd run cattle under its unforgiving glare, watching it turn good pasture to brittle straw and creek beds to cracked, thirsty earth. The summer of 1887 was the worst I'd ever seen. The heat was a physical weight, pressing down on the Texas prairie until the very air shimmered and danced. You learn to read those shimmers. They can trick a man, make him see things that ain't there. So when I first saw them, two small figures moving slow in the distance, I figured it was just the heat playing its games. Maybe a pair of antelope. Maybe just ghosts of the dust. I was mending fence near my eastern boundary, my hands raw from the wire, my hat stained with a decade of sweat. I paused, squinting, my whole world reduced to that wavering spot on the horizon. They weren't animals. They were human. And as they got closer, the shape resolved into something that made the hot air in my lungs turn to ice. It was a boy, no older than 10, I reckoned. His clothes were just rags hanging off a frame that was all bone and desperation. And he was pulling something, dragging it behind him with a focus that was terrifying to watch. It was a travois. Two long branches, lashed together with what looked like strips torn from a shirt, and on that travois was a body. I dropped my wire cutters. The clang they made against the baked dirt was the only sound in the world. I started walking toward him, my boots crunching on the dead grass. Every step brought the horror into sharper focus. The body on the travois was a little girl, maybe 7. She was lying perfectly still, her face waxy and pale with that unmistakable stillness I'd seen too many times out here. The boy saw me coming. He stopped, his whole body tensing like a cornered coyote. He was swaying on his feet, ready to drop. But his eyes were the palest blue, like a sliver of winter sky, and they were fixed on me with a grief so heavy it felt like it could crack the world in two. "Hold there, son," I called out, keeping my voice gentle. I raised a hand to show I meant no harm. He didn't run. He just stood his ground, his small hands still clutching the rope of the travois. He waited until I was just a few feet away, close enough to see the cracks in his lips and the clean tracks his tears had cut through the grime on his face. Then he asked me the question, the one that broke a 15-year callus on my soul and changed my life forever. His voice was a dry rasp, cracking with thirst and sorrow. "Sir," he said, looking right through me, "can you bury my sister?" The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd had men beg me for water, for food, for a bullet to put a lame horse out of its misery. But this? A 10-year-old boy who had dragged his dead sister across miles of sun-scorched hell, asking for nothing more than a shovel and a patch of ground. It was a request so simple, so profound, it knocked the wind right out of me. "What's your name, son?" I asked, kneeling down to get on his level. My knees popped in protest. "Billy Henderson, sir." He gestured with a slight nod toward the still form on the travois. "This here's Mary." He said her name with a finality that told me he'd already said his goodbyes 100 times over. She took sick 3 days ago. Yesterday, she just stopped. I looked at the travois. The branches were smooth, chosen with care. The bindings were tight, knotted with a skill that spoke of a desperate, focused mind. This wasn't just a boy. This was a survivor who had been forced to learn things no child ever should. He'd built this rig, loaded his own sister onto it, and started walking, with no destination in sight but the hope of finding one decent soul in this empty land. "Where are your folks, Billy?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "Dead, sir." The words came out flat, stripped of all emotion. "Pa got shot. Claimed jumpers, about a month back. Ma, she died last winter." He looked down, his small shoulders slumping. "We were trying to get to our uncle's place in San Antonio. San Antonio was hundreds of miles away. It was a death sentence. This boy had been walking into his own grave, pulling his sister behind him. He was on the ragged edge of collapse. I could see it in the way he swayed, the way his eyes struggled to focus. "When's the last time you ate?" He had to think about it. 2 days ago, I guess. Found some berries. They weren't good. I put a hand on his shoulder. It felt like touching a bundle of sticks. "Listen to me, Billy. My name's Thomas McCready. This is my ranch. I'm going to take care of Mary. And I'm going to take care of you." That was what finally broke him. The wall of composure he'd built to survive the last few days crumbled into dust. A sob tore through his small frame, a raw, ragged sound of pure agony. Tears streamed down his face. "She was so scared," he choked out, the words tumbling over each other. "She kept asking for Ma. I didn't know what to do. I tried. I tried to make the fever go away, but I couldn't. I pulled him into an embrace. He was so light, so fragile. He shook with sobs that seemed to come from the very beginning of the world. "You did everything you could, son," I told him, my voice thick. "You did more than most grown men could have. You stayed with her. That's what family does." After he cried himself out, a kind of exhausted calm settled over him. I gently lifted Mary's body from the travois. She weighed almost nothing. I wrapped her in a spare blanket from my saddlebag and laid her carefully across my horse, Jasper. Then I helped Billy up into the saddle in front of me. He leaned back against my chest, his body finally surrendering to the exhaustion he'd been fighting for days. The ride back to my house was quiet. The only sounds were Jasper's steady hoofbeats and Billy's shallow breathing. He was drifting in and out of consciousness, his head lolling against my shoulder. I kept a steady arm around him, a small anchor in his storm-tossed world. My ranch house isn't much, a simple wooden two-story I built with my own hands. But it's solid, it's safe. As I helped Billy down from the horse, he looked at it with wide, wary eyes. The look of an animal that has forgotten what shelter feels like. I settled him on the porch with a cup of cool well water, warning him to drink it slow. He obeyed, his hands trembling as he held the tin cup. While he sipped his water, I took Mary inside. It was time to prepare her for her final rest. I had an old coffin in the barn, one I'd built during the cholera scare years ago. It had sat in a corner collecting dust, waiting for a purpose. It seemed right that it should be for her. I laid her on a clean sheet on the kitchen table. I was a rancher, used to the practicalities of life and death. But this was different. This was a child. With a basin of warm water and a soft cloth, I began to gently wash the dust of the prairie from her face and hands. I combed her tangled brown hair as best I could. She looked so peaceful now, like she was only sleeping. And that's when I saw it. Something that wasn't right. Something that made the hairs on my arm stand up. It was on her wrist, hidden beneath the sleeve of her tattered dress. It wasn't a bruise. It wasn't a scratch from a thorn bush. It was a mark, dark and precise. It was a brand seared into her skin, a strange, intricate symbol, like a coiled snake biting its own tail. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a fever. This little girl hadn't just taken sick. Something had been done to her, something terrible. And Billy's story about claim jumpers and a long journey to San Antonio suddenly felt like a thin veil thrown over a much darker, much more dangerous secret. The boy on my porch wasn't just an orphan. He was a witness, and he was being hunted. The sun began to dip low, painting the sky in fiery streaks of orange and red as I dug Mary's grave. I chose a spot next to my wife, Elizabeth, under the shade of a lone cottonwood tree. The ground was hard and dry, and each shovelful was a struggle, but the work gave me time to think. That brand on Mary's wrist, it was deliberate. It was a message. But what did it mean? And who was it for? Billy sat on the porch steps, watching me. He'd eaten a little bread soaked in milk, his eyes following my every move. There was a wariness in his gaze, the look of a stray dog that wants to trust but has been kicked too many times. He was hiding something. I knew it as sure as I knew my own name, but pushing him now would only scare him off. When the grave was ready, I called him over. We lowered the small wooden coffin into the earth together. I said a simple prayer, my words feeling hollow and inadequate. Billy stood beside me, his hat clutched in his hands, his lips moving silently. Then he went and gathered wildflowers, prairie roses and bluebonnets that had stubbornly survived the drought, and carefully arranged them on the fresh mound of dirt. "She liked flowers," he whispered, his voice so quiet I could barely hear it over the evening breeze. We stood there for a long time as darkness settled over the prairie. The world felt vast and empty. Billy, I said, finally breaking the silence, you can stay here for as long as you need. When you're stronger, if you still want to find that uncle, I'll help you. But if you want to stay, I trailed off, surprised by how much I meant it. This ranch could always use another hand. He looked up at me, and in his pale blue eyes, I saw a flicker of something that wasn't just grief. It was hope, a tiny, fragile spark in the darkness. I'd like that, Mr. McCready, he said. I'd like that very much. That night, I gave him the small room upstairs that had been meant for a child we never had. I expected him to collapse into the bed, but when I checked on him later, I found him sleeping on the floor, curled up in a tight ball against the door. The mattress, he'd claimed, was too soft. But I knew the truth. He was guarding the exit. He was still ready to run. The next few days passed in a strange, quiet rhythm. Billy was a hard worker, throwing himself into chores with a desperate energy, as if trying to prove his worth. He was smart, too. He watched everything, learned quickly. He had a natural gift with the horses. Even my grumpiest old mare seemed to calm under his gentle touch. He was slowly coming back to life. The hollows in his cheeks began to fill out, and the constant hunted look in his eyes started to fade. But the fear was still there, lurking just beneath the surface. He never spoke of his parents or of Mary unless I asked. And even then, his answers were short and rehearsed. He'd jump at sudden noises. At night, I'd hear him wake from nightmares, his muffled cries echoing in the quiet house. And he always watched the horizon. Every morning, every evening, his eyes would scan the vast, empty expanse of the prairie, searching, waiting. One night, about a week after he'd arrived, I saw it too. I was sitting on the porch, enjoying the cool night air, when I caught a flicker of light far to the east. It wasn't a star, it was a campfire. And then another one, maybe a mile north of the first. They were too far away to be a threat, but they were too organized to be simple drifters. They were searchers, spreading out, combing the prairie in a systematic grid. My heart pounded in my chest. They were looking for him. The next morning, I decided to press him. We were out checking the northern fence line, the same spot where I'd first seen him. I kept my tone casual. Billy, those claim jumpers that got your pa, you ever see them before? He stiffened. His eyes darted toward the horizon before meeting mine. No, sir, never. What did they look like? He hesitated, his gaze dropping to the ground. Just, men. They were rough, mean. Did they have a brand on their horses? Any markings? He shook his head a little too quickly. I don't remember. It all happened so fast. He was lying. I could see it plain as day. The fear was back in his eyes, sharp and raw. He was protecting a secret he believed would get us both killed. Son, I said, my voice firm but gentle, those campfires I saw last night, those aren't drifters. They're looking for you. If you don't tell me the truth, I can't protect you. Who are they, Billy? Who are you really running from? His face went pale. He looked like he was about to bolt. He took a step back, then another. His eyes were wide with terror. You don't understand, he whispered, his voice trembling. They're not just men. They'll kill you too. Just like they killed Pa. Just like they... He stopped, his throat working. A single tear rolled down his cheek. Just like they... Did what, Billy? I prompted softly. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. It wasn't a fever, he finally choked out. Mary. They did that to her. The mark. They put it on her. It was a warning. For Pa. He wouldn't give them what they wanted. A cold dread washed over me. What did they want, Billy? The map, he whispered, his voice barely audible. My pa had a map. They said it led to the heart of the prairie. They tortured him for it, but he never told them where he hid it. And where did he hide it, son? Billy's gaze was steady, his chin set with a resolve that was heartbreaking in a boy so young. He gave it to me, he said, just before he died. He told me to run, to get to San Antonio. He said our uncle would know what to do. So that was it, a treasure map, a secret that had gotten his entire family killed. And now this small, broken boy was the only one who held the key. The men hunting him weren't just killers, they were treasure hunters, and they would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. But there was still one piece that didn't fit, the brand on Mary's wrist. It wasn't the mark of common thieves. It was too intricate, too specific. It felt official, like the mark of a powerful organization. Billy, I asked, my voice low, did you ever hear your pa mention a name? The name of the man who led them? He nodded slowly, his eyes dark with memory. They called him the patriarch, but Pa called him Rollins. The world stopped. Rollins. The name was a ghost from a past I had buried 15 years ago. A past of smoke and blood and failure. A past I had run from when I traded my Texas Ranger badge for this quiet life. Jebediah Rollins, a ruthless land baron who ran a shadowy organization that was more like a cult than a cattle empire. They believed this land held secrets, ancient power, and they used fear and violence to seize whatever they wanted. And my wife Elizabeth, she hadn't just died from a fever that swept the county. She'd caught it while helping a family of homesteaders, a young couple with 2 small children, escape from Rollins's grasp after they'd stumbled upon something they shouldn't have. I had tried to help them, tried to use my badge to bring Rollins to justice, but he was too powerful, too well-connected. He'd gotten away with it. And Elizabeth had paid the price. I never knew what happened to that homesteader family. They vanished without a trace. Until now. I looked at the boy standing in front of me, at his pale blue eyes and his stubborn chin. My God, he wasn't just any orphan. He was Billy Henderson, the son of the very man I had failed to save all those years ago. Fate hadn't just brought a lost child to my doorstep. It had brought me a second chance, a chance at redemption. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. The world tilted on its axis, and for a moment, all I could hear was the rushing of blood in my ears. The past wasn't dead. It wasn't even past. It had been walking toward me across the prairie, dragging its dead, and now it was standing in my yard. Billy Henderson, the boy I was protecting, was the son of the man I'd failed. Elizabeth's final desperate act of charity hadn't been in vain. She had helped this boy's family, and now by some cruel twist of fate, it was my turn to finish the job. Mr. McCready, are you all right? Billy's small voice cut through the fog in my mind. He was looking at me with concern, his own terror momentarily forgotten. I forced myself to breathe. In, out. I had to be strong. For him. I'm fine, son, I said, my voice rougher than I intended. I knew your father, a long time ago, and I knew Rollins. Billy's eyes widened. You did? I did, I confirmed, the taste of ash in my mouth. And I know what kind of man he is. He won't stop, not until he has that map. I knelt down in front of him, putting my hands on his shoulders. Billy, we need to be smart, and we need to be ready. That story about an uncle in San Antonio, was that true? He shook his head. No, sir. Pa made it up. He said if I was ever caught, I should tell them that, to send them on a wild goose chase. He said the map wasn't a drawing on paper. It was a memory. My heart hammered against my ribs. A memory? What does that mean? He made me memorize it, Billy explained, his voice gaining a bit of strength as he recounted his father's last instructions. A poem, a rhyme. He said only a Henderson would understand it. Where the sleeping giant guards the stream, and the hawk's shadow follows the gleam. 3 days' walk from the hanging tree, the heart of the prairie waits for thee. It sounded like nonsense, a child's rhyme. But to a man like Rollins, it was the key to a kingdom. He believed the legends of this land, the stories of hidden springs that never ran dry, of gold veins thick as a man's arm. The heart of the prairie could be anything, but whatever it was, Rollins was willing to burn the world down to find it. And he told you to run, I said, piecing it together, to just keep moving. No, Billy said, and this was the part that made my blood run cold. He told me to find a specific place. He said if I was in trouble, I had to find the ranch with the lone cottonwood on the hill, the one that bordered the old Henderson claim. My ranch with the single cottonwood tree shading Elizabeth's grave, the tree that I was looking at right now. My property line ran along the edge of what used to be a small, failed homestead, the Henderson claim. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't fate. It was a plan. His father hadn't sent him out into the wilderness at random. He had sent him to me. He must have remembered me, the ranger who had tried to help him. He had gambled his son's life on the hope that I was still here and that I was still a good man. The weight of that trust was crushing. "They're not just looking for you, Billy," I said, my voice grim. "They're coming here." That night, the house was no longer a sanctuary. It was a fortress waiting for a siege. We didn't light any lamps. We sat in the dark, watching the distant campfires of Rollins' men. There were more of them now, forming a tightening ring around my property. They were patient. They knew we were here. They were just waiting for their master to arrive. I pulled out my old gear from a dusty trunk in the attic. A Peacemaker revolver, its grip worn smooth from years of use. A Winchester rifle that hadn't been fired in over a decade. The Texas Ranger Star, tarnished with age. I polished it on my sleeve, the memories flooding back. The camaraderie, the danger. The bitter taste of failure when I couldn't save Elizabeth. "Were you a lawman?" Billy asked, his voice a whisper in the dark. He was looking at the star in my hand with awe. "A long time ago," I said, "before I learned that some snakes are too big for one man to handle." "Is Rollins a snake?" "He's the king of snakes, son." We spent the next day preparing. We boarded up the downstairs windows. We brought extra water in from the well. We loaded every weapon I owned. I taught Billy how to load and fire the shotgun, the kick of it nearly knocking him off his feet. He didn't complain. He just set his jaw, reloaded, and got ready to do it again. The scared little boy was gone. In his place was a soldier, his father's son, ready to defend his last patch of ground. The quiet before the storm was the worst part. The waiting, the prairie was silent. No birds sang. The cattle were restless, sensing the coming violence. Every gust of wind sounded like hoofbeats. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. They came on the third day just after dawn. They didn't ride in shooting. That wasn't Rollins' style. He preferred the illusion of civility before the bloodshed. A single rider approached the house, carrying a white flag of truce, but I could see at least a dozen more men waiting on the ridgeline, their rifles glinting in the morning sun. The rider was a man I recognized, Silas Croft, Rollins' right hand, a man with cold, dead eyes and a cruel twist to his mouth. "McCready!" he yelled, stopping 100 yards from the house. "The patriarch knows the boy is in there. He wants what's his. Send the boy out, and he'll let you live." I stepped out onto the porch, my Winchester held loosely in my hands. Billy was right behind me, crouched in the doorway with the shotgun, just as I'd taught him. "This is my land, Silas," I shouted back. "The boy is under my protection. You tell Rollins to ride on before he gets hurt." Silas laughed, a harsh, ugly sound that grated on the nerves. "You're a fool, old man. You were a fool when you were a ranger, and you're a fool now. The patriarch isn't asking. He'll burn this place to the ground with you and the boy inside." "Then come and try it." Silas's smile vanished. He wheeled his horse around and galloped back to his men. The parley was over. The quiet returned for a moment, thick with tension. Billy's knuckles were white where he gripped the shotgun. His breathing was shallow. "What happens now, Mr. McCready?" he asked. "Now," I said, cocking the hammer on my rifle, "we show them what happens when you corner a lion and his cub." The first shot came from the ridge. It wasn't aimed at us. It slammed into the water trough by the barn, splintering the wood and sending a geyser of water into the air. It was a statement, a demonstration of power. "We can touch you whenever we want. We control your water. We control your life." They thought they had us trapped. They thought we were just a broken-down old rancher and a little boy. They were about to find out how wrong they were, because the sleeping giant in Billy's rhyme, it wasn't a mountain or a rock formation. I'd figured it out late last night, staring at an old survey map of my property. It was a dry riverbed that ran along the western edge of my land, shaped like a man lying on his back. A riverbed that, according to the map, was supposed to be bone dry year-round. But I knew something Rollins didn't. I knew this land. I knew its secrets. And I knew that deep underground, in a hidden cavern right beneath that riverbed, was a spring. A powerful artesian spring that never stopped flowing. The true heart of the prairie. It wasn't gold, it was water. In this parched land, water was life. It was power. It was everything. The Henderson family hadn't been guarding a treasure. They had been guarding the future of this whole territory, and Billy's father hadn't sent him to me by accident. He had sent his son, the living map, to the one man who already owned the lock. My ranch was the only access point to the cavern. Rollins didn't want a map. He wanted my land. He'd been trying to buy me out for years, and I'd always refused. Now I knew why. He'd killed the Hendersons to get their secret, and now he was here to kill us to get the land that secret unlocked. The fight wasn't just for Billy. It was for everything. It was for Elizabeth's memory, for the Hendersons' sacrifice, and for the soul of this prairie. The second shot hit the porch post right next to my head, showering me with splinters. The siege had begun. The day bled into a long, brutal rhythm of gunfire and silence. Rollins's men were professionals. They didn't charge blindly. They used the terrain, moving from cover to cover, tightening the noose around the house. They fired in coordinated volleys, trying to pin us down, to make us waste our ammunition. But I was a professional too, and I knew my land better than they did. "Billy," I said during a lull in the shooting, "you see that big rock outcropping to the north? The one that looks like a coyote's head?" He peeked over the windowsill. "Yes, sir. Count to 5 after the next volley, then put a shotgun blast right at the base of it. But there's no one there." "Trust me," I said. The world exploded in a roar of rifle fire as another volley slammed into the front of the house, wood splintered, glass shattered. We ducked down, waiting. The moment the firing stopped, I yelled, "Now!" Billy stood up, aimed, and fired. The shotgun bucked in his small hands, but his aim was true. The buckshot ripped into the dry bushes at the base of the rock. A man screamed, a howl of pain and surprise. One of Rollins's snipers, thinking he was perfectly hidden, had been flushed out. He staggered out from behind the rock, clutching a bloody leg, and I took him down with a single, clean shot from the Winchester. One down. Billy looked at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. "How did you know?" "I know where the shadows fall on this land," I told him, "and I know a man always thinks he's safest in the deepest shadow." We settled into a grim partnership. He became my spotter, his young eyes sharp and quick, while I used my experience to predict the enemy's movements. We were outnumbered, outgunned, but we were fighting on our own ground. This house, this porch, this yard, they were an extension of me. I knew every dip, every rise, every patch of ground that offered cover. They tried to set fire to the barn. 2 men crept up under the cover of dusk, carrying torches. I saw the faint glint of moonlight on a rifle barrel from the hayloft window. Billy had seen them too. I didn't have to say a word. He rested the shotgun on the sill, took a deep breath, and fired. The blast echoed in the twilight, followed by shouts and the frantic scramble of men retreating. The barn was safe. For now. But we were bleeding. Not blood, but resources. Our ammunition was finite. Our water wouldn't last forever. And Rollins had time on his side. He could wait us out, starve us out. Sometime after midnight, the shooting stopped completely. The silence was more unnerving than the gunfire. It meant they were planning something new. I sent Billy to get some sleep, but I knew he wouldn't. He was running on pure nerve now, just like me. I sat in the dark, my back against the wall, the Winchester across my lap. I thought of Elizabeth. I thought of the promise I'd made to her, that I would leave the violence behind. I had failed, but maybe this was the only way to truly honor her, to finish the fight she had died trying to win. Just before dawn, I heard a new sound, a low, rhythmic creaking. I crept to a crack in the boarded-up window. In the pale pre-dawn light, I could see what they had been doing all night. They had dragged a heavy wagon to the edge of the ridge, and they had loaded it with bales of hay soaked in oil. They were going to set it on fire and roll it down the hill into the house. It was a battering ram made of flame. There was no way to stop it. The house would go up like a tinderbox. We were going to be burned alive. "Billy," I said, my voice low and urgent, "get your boots on. We're leaving." "Leaving? But where can we go?" "Out the back. Through the cellar. There's an old storm cellar 50 yards from the house. It leads out into a dry creek bed. If we're lucky, we can make it there before they realize we're not in the house. It was a desperate gamble, a suicide run, but it was the only chance we had. We crept down into the dusty cellar. I could hear the shouts of Rollins' men above us, the final preparations for their assault. I unbarred the heavy cellar door that led outside. It opened onto a small, stone-lined ditch. 50 yards of open ground lay between us and the entrance to the storm cellar. 50 yards of a killing field. "When I say run, you run," I whispered to Billy. "Don't look back. Don't stop for anything. You hear me?" He nodded, his face a pale oval in the darkness. He was terrified, but he didn't cry. He just gripped the shotgun tighter. I could see the first flicker of orange against the sky. They were lighting the wagon. "Ready?" I breathed. He gave a sharp nod. "Run!" We burst out of the cellar, sprinting across the open yard. The world erupted. Shouts of surprise from the ridgeline, the sharp crack of rifles. Bullets kicked up dirt around our feet. One whizzed past my ear with an angry buzz. I didn't dare look back. I just ran, pushing Billy in front of me. We were halfway there when I felt a searing, white-hot pain in my left thigh. My leg buckled. I went down hard, the Winchester flying from my grasp. "Mr. McCready!" Billy screamed, turning back. "No!" I yelled, trying to push myself up. My leg was useless. "Keep going. Get to the cellar." "I'm not leaving you," he cried, his voice breaking with panic. He ran back to my side, trying to haul me to my feet. Behind us, the burning wagon started to roll. It was a chariot of fire, rumbling down the hill, gathering speed, aimed directly at the house where they thought we were trapped. In a few seconds, it would hit, and the whole world would be fire and smoke. We were out of time. I looked up and saw them, Rollins' men, standing on the ridge, silhouetted against the flames. They were raising their rifles, taking careful aim, ready to finish us off. This was it, the end of the line. And then I saw him, Jebediah Rollins himself. He was stepping out from behind his men, a long-barreled pistol in his hand. He wasn't aiming at me. He was aiming at the boy. He was going to kill Billy right in front of my eyes. A primal rage, cold and pure, surged through me. I would not fail again. I would not let him take this boy. "Billy," I gasped, shoving something into his hand. "The poem, 'The hawk's shadow follows the gleam.' What does it mean?" He looked at me confused, his face stained with tears. "Pa said, when the sun is highest, the shadow of Hawk's Peak falls on a patch of shiny rock. A Mecca deposit. That's the gleam." Of course. It wasn't just a poem. It was directions. Precise directions. "Good boy," I said, forcing a grin. I looked up at the ridge. Rollins was savoring his moment of victory. "It's over, McCready," he boomed, his voice dripping with triumph. "The land is mine. The secret is mine." "You want the secret, Rollins?" I yelled back, my voice echoing across the yard. "You want the heart of the prairie? Then come and get it." With a roar, I pushed myself up onto my good leg. I grabbed Billy and half threw him toward the storm cellar. "Go! Now! Bar the door from the inside." He stumbled, caught his footing, and ran. He dove into the dark opening of the cellar, just as the flaming wagon smashed into my house. The impact was deafening. The house imploded in a ball of fire and black smoke, the heat so intense I could feel it on my face from 50 yards away. Rollins' men were cheering. They thought we were dead, all except Rollins. He was still watching the cellar. He knew one of us had made it, but I had given Billy his instructions, and I had given Rollins the misdirection he wanted. He thought the secret was a map, a location. He would tear this ranch apart looking for it. He would waste time Billy needed to get away. I lay there in the dirt, my leg on fire, watching the home I had built burn to the ground. I had lost everything, but I had saved the boy. That was all that mattered. I closed my eyes, waiting for the final shot, but it didn't come. Instead, I heard a new sound, a sound that didn't belong, the thunder of hoofbeats, dozens of them, coming fast. I opened my eyes. Over the ridge, pouring down the hill like an avenging flood, was a troop of Texas Rangers. They weren't supposed to be here. I hadn't sent for help. There was no time. How could they possibly know? The lead rider, a grim-faced captain, reined his horse to a stop beside me. He looked from my bleeding leg to the inferno that was once my house. "Got your message, Thomas," he said, his voice gravelly. "Just in time, it seems." "Message?" I croaked, confused. "I didn't send a message." He pointed toward the cellar. The heavy wooden door was swinging open. Billy was standing there, covered in soot, the shotgun still in his hands. He wasn't crying anymore. His face was set with a grim determination that made him look 20 years older. "The boy did," the captain said. "He slipped out the back of the cellar into the creek bed an hour ago. Rode one of your horses bareback for 10 miles to our outpost. Said his paw was in trouble." I stared at Billy. He hadn't just run and hidden as I'd told him. He had disobeyed me. He had risked everything to ride for help. He had saved my life. The fight was over for Rawlins's men. They were caught between the Rangers and the fire, confused and disorganized. Justice, swift and brutal, was finally being served. Rawlins, however, was gone. In the chaos, he had slipped away. But it didn't matter. He had lost. He didn't have the boy. He didn't have the land. And he didn't have the secret. As the Rangers tended to my leg, Billy came and knelt beside me. He placed a small, grimy hand on my shoulder. "I wasn't going to leave you," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Family doesn't leave family behind." I looked at this incredible, brave, stubborn boy, and for the first time since Elizabeth died, I felt a profound, aching sense of hope. The fire had taken my house, but it hadn't taken my home. My home was right here, kneeling in the dirt beside me. We had won. 10 years later, I stand on the porch of a new house, built with my own hands on the ashes of the old one. It's bigger than the first, stronger, built to hold a family. The sun is setting, painting the Texas sky in shades of orange and purple. The prairie is quiet, peaceful. The only sound is the gentle evening breeze and the distant lowing of cattle. Billy stands next to me. He's not a boy anymore. He's 20 years old, tall and strong, with my last name and his father's eyes. The ranch, now the McCready-Henderson spread, is one of the most successful in the territory. The secret of the spring, our secret, has allowed us to thrive even in the worst droughts. We share the water with our neighbors, building a community on the foundation of a secret that once tore families apart. Rawlins was never seen again. Some say he fled to Mexico. Some say the prairie swallowed him whole. I like to think he's still out there somewhere, a bitter old man haunted by the ghosts of a boy and a rancher who refused to break. Billy married Sarah, the school teacher from town, last spring. She's standing on the porch with us now, her hand resting on her stomach. Our first grandchild is on the way, a new generation for this land, a new link in a chain forged not by blood, but by fire and loyalty and love. Every year on the anniversary of the siege, we visit 2 graves under the lone cottonwood tree, Mary's and Elizabeth's. We place wildflowers on the mounds of earth, and we tell them the stories of our year. We tell them about the ranch, about our growing family, about the peace that was bought at such a high price. People in town sometimes talk about the orphan boy I took in. They see him as the son I never had. They don't know the truth. They don't know that in saving him, I saved myself. He gave me a reason to fight again, a reason to live again. The boy who asked me to bury his sister has become the man who will bury me when my time comes. And he will carry on the legacy of 2 families, Henderson and McCready, as one. He taught me the most important lesson there is. Home isn't a place you build with wood and nails. It's a place you build with your heart. Sometimes when the wind howls just right, it sounds like a story being whispered across the plains. A story about courage and sacrifice and a love so strong it can turn a broken old man and a terrified little boy into a family. And a family, I've learned, is the only treasure worth fighting for. If you enjoyed this story and you believe that the toughest fights forge the strongest bonds, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You never know when another story from the heart of the prairie might just find its way to you.